The selection hall on Vareth Prime was the largest building Kiraveth had ever seen. Its walls stretched up toward the sky like the bones of some ancient giant. Blue and purple lights floated near the ceiling, casting soft shadows on the hundreds of young beings gathered below. Today was the day of partnership, the day when students from across 12 star systems would choose their companions for the next 5 years of study. Kira stood at the far corner of the hall, pressed against the cold wall. She tried to make herself small, tried to disappear into the shadows. It never worked, but she tried anyway. She was a Sylvari, a species known throughout the galaxy for their beauty and grace. Her people had wings made of soft feathers that shimmered like starlight. They could dance through the air as easily as fish swam through water. Poets wrote songs about Sylvari flight. Artists painted their wings in colors that did not exist on most worlds. But Kira could not fly. She had been born with her left wing twisted and wrong. The bones had not formed properly. The feathers grew in uneven patterns. No matter how hard she tried, no matter how many healers her family consulted, the wing would not work. It hung against her back like a broken promise, a constant reminder of everything she would never be. This was her 7th selection ceremony. 7 times she had stood in this hall. 7 times she had watched others form partnerships while she remained alone. The memory of each rejection sat heavy in her chest like stones. She watched the crowd move and shift around her. A group of Torvins, tall and powerful with scales that gleamed like polished metal, laughed together near the center of the hall. They would all find partners easily. Everyone wanted a Torvin on their team. The Midori floated nearby, their crystal bodies catching the light and throwing rainbows across the floor. They were brilliant scholars, and partnerships with them guaranteed academic success. No one looked at Kira. No one ever did. Across the hall, a young human male named Daniel Carter stood with his mouth hanging open. He had never seen so many different species in one place. There were beings with 4 arms and beings with no arms at all. There were creatures made of living rock and creatures that seemed to be made of pure light. The diversity was overwhelming. Daniel was one of only 12 humans at the Academy. Earth had joined the Galactic Consortium just 3 years ago, and humans were still considered newcomers. Most species did not know what to make of them. Humans could not fly. They had no natural weapons. They were not particularly strong or fast or smart compared to other species. Many wondered why they had been allowed to join at all. A Torvin named Grex stood beside Daniel. They had met during orientation week, and Grex had taken it upon himself to explain galactic customs to the confused human. "The ceremony will begin soon," Grex said. "You must choose quickly when it starts. The best partners go first." Daniel nodded slowly. "How do I know who the best partners are?" Grex made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Look for strength. Look for ability. Look for those who can help you succeed. Avoid the weak ones. They will only drag you down." Daniel frowned at this advice but said nothing. He continued scanning the crowd, taking in all the strange and wonderful beings around him. Then he saw her. She stood alone in the corner, a Sylvari girl with silver hair and silver eyes. One of her wings was clearly damaged, folded awkwardly against her back. While everyone else moved and talked and laughed, she stood perfectly still, staring at the floor. "Who is that?" Daniel asked, pointing toward her. Grex glanced in her direction and made a dismissive noise. "No one important. A broken Sylvari. She cannot fly, so she is worthless to her people. She has been here for many cycles, but no one ever chooses her. Forget about her." Daniel did not forget about her. He watched as being after being walked past her without a second look. He saw the way her shoulders dropped slightly each time, the tiny movements of the feet she probably did not even notice she was making. He saw her swallow hard and blink rapidly, fighting back emotions she did not want to show. Something in his chest tightened. The ceremony began with a loud sound that echoed through the hall. Beings started moving toward each other, forming pairs and small groups. The strong found the strong. The brilliant found the brilliant. Within minutes, the hall was full of newly formed partnerships celebrating their good fortune. Kira remained alone. She always remained alone. She told herself it did not hurt anymore. She had experienced this rejection so many times that she should be used to it by now, but it still hurt. It hurt every single time. She was about to leave, to slip away before the ceremony officially ended, when she noticed someone walking toward her. A human. The strange creature from the distant world called Earth. He was moving through the crowd with purpose, his eyes fixed directly on her. Kira's heart began to beat faster. Surely he was not coming to her. Surely he had mistaken her for someone else. She looked around, expecting to see another student nearby, someone he was actually trying to reach. There was no one else. Just her. Daniel stopped in front of the Sylvari girl and smiled. Up close, he could see how beautiful she was, even with her damaged wing. Her silver eyes held depths of pain and loneliness that he recognized. He had seen that same look in the eyes of outcasts back on Earth. "Hi," he said. "I'm Daniel." Kira stared at him. She did not know how to respond. No one had spoken to her during a selection ceremony in 4 years. "You have made a mistake," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You do not want me as a partner. I cannot fly. I cannot do what other Sylvari do. I am broken." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "I can't fly either. Humans don't have wings." "That is different, is it?" Daniel extended his hand toward her. It was a human gesture of friendship, something he had done 1,000 times back home. "Will you walk with me?" Kira looked at his hand as if it might bite her. "You do not understand. I will slow you down. I will embarrass you. Everyone will laugh at you for choosing me. Let them laugh," Daniel said simply. "I don't really care what everyone thinks. I care about what I think. And I think you've been standing alone for way too long." Tears formed in Kira's silver eyes. She tried to blink them away, but they fell anyway, streaming down her cheeks like liquid starlight. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you choose me?" Daniel kept his hand extended, patient and steady. "Because no one should have to stand alone. And because I think you're probably pretty amazing, even if no one else has bothered to notice." For a long moment, Kira did not move. 7 years of rejection had taught her to expect nothing good. 7 years of loneliness had made her afraid of hope. But something about this human felt different. Something about his warm brown eyes and his gentle smile made her want to believe. Slowly, carefully, as if reaching for something that might disappear at any moment, Kira took Daniel's hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and real. "Partners?" he asked. Kira nodded, unable to speak through her tears. Around them, the hall had gone quiet. Every species was watching the strange scene, the human and the broken Sylvari, standing hand in hand. For the first time in 7 years, Kira Veth was not alone. The first weeks after the selection ceremony were the strangest of Kira's life. She kept waiting for Daniel to change his mind. She kept expecting him to realize his mistake and request a new partner. Every morning when she woke up, she told herself that today would be the day he would leave. But Daniel never left. He met her outside her sleeping quarters each morning and walked with her to breakfast. He sat beside her in every class they shared. When the path was difficult or her damaged wing caused her pain, he slowed his pace without being asked. He never complained. He never sighed with impatience. He simply adjusted and kept walking. The other students noticed. Of course, they noticed. Whispers followed Daniel and Kira wherever they went. Some laughed. Some shook their heads in confusion. The Sylvari were particularly cruel. speaking loudly about the foolish human who had saddled himself with their greatest embarrassment. Daniel ignored them all. When Kira tried to apologize for the negative attention, he just shrugged. "Words don't bother me," he said. "I grew up with 3 older brothers. Trust me, I've heard worse." Kira did not understand him. She did not understand any of this. In her experience, kindness always came with conditions. People were nice when they wanted something. They helped when it benefited them. The idea of someone being kind simply to be kind seemed impossible. One evening, as they studied together in the academy gardens, she finally asked a question that had been burning inside her. "Why do you stay with me?" Daniel looked up from his reading tablet. "What do you mean?" "You could request a transfer. You could find a better partner, someone who could actually help you succeed." Kira gestured at her twisted wing. "I am a burden. Everyone knows this. So why do you stay?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. He set down his tablet and turned to face her fully. "Kira, where I come from, we have this idea. It's pretty simple, actually. We judge people by how they treat others who can't help them. Does that make sense?" Kira frowned. "No, that makes no sense at all." "I know it probably sounds strange," Daniel admitted. "But think about it. Anyone can be nice to someone powerful, someone who might give them something in return. That's easy. But being good to someone just because it's the right thing to do? That's harder. And I think that's what actually matters." "Your species is very strange," Kira said. Daniel laughed. "Yeah, I've been told that a few times." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The twin moons of Verith Prime rose slowly above the garden walls, casting silver light across the alien flowers. "I still do not understand you," Kira said finally. "But I am grateful. More grateful than I know how to say." Daniel smiled at her. "You don't have to understand me. You just have to trust me. Can you do that?" Kira thought about it. Trust was dangerous. Trust meant opening yourself up to pain. But looking into Daniel's honest eyes, she found herself nodding. "I will try," she said. News of their partnership spread throughout the human community at the academy. There were only 12 humans in total, a tiny group in a sea of alien species. They tended to stick together, supporting each other in this strange new world. A few days after the garden conversation, a human woman approached Daniel after class. Her name was Lisa Monroe, and she studied xenobiology, the science of alien life forms. "You're Daniel Carter," she said. It was not a question. Daniel nodded. "That's me. I've been watching you and your partner, the Savari girl." Lisa smiled warmly. "I think what you're doing is wonderful." "I'm not doing anything special," Daniel said. "I'm just being her friend." "That's exactly what makes it special." Lisa paused. "Some of us want to help. Would that be okay?" Daniel was surprised but pleased. "I'd have to ask Kira. It's not my decision alone." That evening, Daniel told Kira about the offer. He expected her to refuse. She had spent so many years being avoided that the idea of people wanting to be around her might seem threatening. But Kira surprised him. After a long silence, she nodded slowly. "If they truly want to help," she said, "I will not refuse them." Within a week, a small group had formed around Kira. Lisa Monroe visited regularly, asking questions about Savari biology and culture. She seemed genuinely fascinated by everything Kira told her. Nathan Park, an engineer with clever hands and a quick mind, began designing a special brace that might help support Kira's damaged wing. Amy Green, a medical student, researched Savari anatomy and promised to find ways to ease Kira's chronic pain. Then there was Chris. Donnelly. Chris was different from the others. He walked with a slight limp, and when Kira looked closely, she realized his left leg was not real. It was a prosthetic, a mechanical replacement for the leg he had lost in an accident as a child. He did not ask questions or offer solutions. He simply sat beside Kira one afternoon and told her his story. "I was 7 when it happened," Chris said. "A transport crash. Lost my leg below the knee. For a long time, I thought my life was over. I thought I would never be normal, never be accepted." Kira listened quietly, her silver eyes fixed on his face. "But here's the thing," Chris continued. "Normal is overrated. And being different doesn't mean being less. It took me a long time to learn that, but I did eventually." He smiled at her. "You'll learn it too." Kira felt tears threatening to fall again. She had cried more in the past few weeks than in the previous several years combined. These humans kept finding ways to reach past her defenses. "Why are you all being so kind to me?" she asked. "You do not know me. You owe me nothing." Chris shrugged. "That's just how humans are. We take care of each other. And now you're one of us." That night, Kira lay in her sleeping quarters and stared at the ceiling. Her damaged wing ached as it always did, but somehow the pain seemed less important than before. She thought about Daniel and his strange human wisdom. She thought about Lisa and her endless curiosity, about Nathan and his clever inventions, about Amy and her healing knowledge, about Chris and his understanding. These humans were not like any species she had ever encountered. They were weak by galactic standards. They could not fly. They had no natural armor or weapons. They were not particularly fast or strong or long-lived, but they had something else. Something harder to name but impossible to ignore. They saw value in those that others threw away. They offered kindness without expecting anything in return. They walked beside the broken instead of leaving them behind. For the first time in her life, Kira allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she was not as worthless as she had always believed. Maybe the human saw something in her that she could not see in herself. And maybe, if she was brave enough, she could learn to see it too. The announcement appeared on every screen in the academy. The trial of Ascension was open for registration. 40 pairs would compete. Only 10 would earn recognition. The trial was legendary. For hundreds of years, students had tested themselves against Mount Vareth, the tallest peak on the planet. The challenge required strength, intelligence, and teamwork. Partners had to navigate dangerous terrain, solve complex puzzles, and reach the summit before sunset dot, and the final ascent could only be completed by flight. Daniel found Kira reading the announcement, her face pale and sad. "It sounds incredible," she said quietly. "I have always wanted to see the summit. They say you can see 3 moons from there at sunset." "Then let's go," Daniel said. Kira shook her head. "You know, I cannot. The final ascent requires flight. Every species that competes can fly except yours." She paused. "And I cannot fly either. So we'll both be grounded." "That's fine." Daniel grinned. "We'll figure something out." Kira stared at him. "Daniel, it is impossible. No ground-bound pair has ever completed the trial. Ever. In 300 years of attempts. Then we'll be the first." Before Kira could argue further, Daniel walked away to register their names. The MeHFY administrator looked at Daniel with obvious confusion. His crystalline face twisted into an expression of disbelief. "You wish to enter the trial with the Sylvari who cannot fly?" The administrator asked. "Yes. You understand that the final ascent is impossible without aerial capability?" "I understand that's what everyone believes," Daniel said. "But I'd still like to try." The administrator shook his head slowly. "Very well. It is your right to fail spectacularly." News of their entry spread quickly. Most students laughed. The idea of a flightless human and a broken Sylvari attempting the trial of Ascension was the funniest thing they had heard in years. Kira begged Daniel to withdraw. Please, she said. This will only bring us humiliation. Everyone will laugh at us. Let them laugh now, Daniel replied. We'll see who's laughing at sunset. He spent the next 3 weeks preparing. He contacted friends on Earth and had special equipment shipped to Verith Prime, long coils of rope, metal hooks that could grip rock, harnesses and clips, and other strange devices that no one on the planet had ever seen before. What is all this? Kira asked, staring at the pile of gear. Climbing equipment. On Earth, we have mountains much taller than Mount Verith. Humans have been climbing them for thousands of years. Daniel held up a metal hook. We can't fly, so we learned to go up the hard way. On the morning of the trial, 40 pairs gathered at the base of the mountain. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The summit was hidden by clouds, impossibly far above. Kira looked at the other competitors. Sylvari spread their magnificent wings. MeHFY activated their levitation crystals. Torvins engaged their gravity manipulation devices. Every species had some method of flight. Every species except humans. We're really doing this, Kira whispered. Daniel shouldered his pack of climbing gear. We're really doing this. A horn sounded, deep and loud. The trial had begun. The other pairs launched into the sky, racing toward the first checkpoint. Within seconds, they were specks against the clouds. Daniel and Kira began to walk. The first 3 checkpoints were puzzle stations scattered across the lower slopes of the mountain. Each station presented a challenge that required 2 minds working together. The puzzles tested knowledge of galactic history, xenobiology, physics, and logic. Kira was brilliant at puzzles. Her years of isolation had given her endless time to study, while other students had been socializing and making friends. She had been reading, learning, absorbing knowledge that she never thought she would use. She and Daniel solved the first puzzle in 12 minutes. The fastest flying team had taken 30. The second puzzle fell in 15 minutes. The third took only 9. By the time they reached the 4th checkpoint, they were ahead on points despite being hours behind physically. The aerial teams were fast, but many of them struggled with the intellectual challenges. A Torvin pair passed Daniel and Kira on their way to the 5th checkpoint. The lead Torvin, a massive warrior, sneered down at them. The human and the broken bird, he said loudly. Still playing your little game? The mountain will crush you. Daniel ignored him. Kira tried to do the same, but the words still stung. They continued climbing. The path grew steeper. Rocks became unstable. Several times, Kira stumbled, and Daniel caught her arm to steady her. I'm slowing you down, she said. We're partners. We move at our own pace. The sun crossed the sky. Afternoon arrived. They reached the base of the final ascent as the light began to turn golden. The cliff was enormous. Straight up, hundreds of feet of sheer rock face. There were no paths, no handholds, no way up, except through the air. Every other team had simply flown to the top. Daniel studied the rock carefully. Then he began removing gear from his pack. The equipment I told you about, he said, uncoiling the rope. Mountaineering. This is what it's for. For the next 3 hours, they climbed. Daniel went first, driving the metal hooks into cracks in the rock, creating anchor points, securing the rope. Then Kira followed, using the rope to pull herself up. Inch by inch, foot by foot, handhold by handhold. The work was brutal. Kira's muscles screamed with pain. Her damaged wing throbbed as it banged against the rock. Her fingers bled from gripping the rough stone. I can't, she gasped at one point, frozen against the cliff face. I can't do this. Daniel was above her, secured to an anchor point. He looked down with calm, steady eyes. Yes, you can. One move at a time. Don't think about the top. Just think about the next handhold. I'm going to fall. No, you're not. I've got you. He patted the rope that connected them. If you fall, I catch you. That's how this works. Partners, remember? Kira closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then she reached for the next handhold. The sun began to set. Orange and pink and purple painted the sky. The twin moons of Earth Prime started their rise. They were so close to the top. Just 30 more feet. But Kira's strength was completely gone. She hung on the rope, unable to move, unable to climb another inch. I'm sorry, she said, tears running down her face. I can't make it. You should go on without me. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he began climbing down toward her. What are you doing? Kira asked. We started together. We finished together. He positioned himself below her, his feet braced against the rock. Put your feet on my shoulders. What? I'll push you up. You grab the top edge and pull yourself over. You'll fall. The rope will hold me. Trust me, Kira, please. Kira looked into his eyes. She saw no fear there, only determination and something else. Something she had learned to recognize over these past months. She saw faith. Faith in her. Carefully, she placed her feet on his shoulders. Daniel braced himself and pushed upward with all his remaining strength. Kira reached up, her fingers finding the edge of the cliff. She pulled with everything she had, her muscles burning, her heart pounding, and then she was over. She lay on the summit, gasping for breath, staring at the sky. A moment later, Daniel pulled himself up beside her. The last rays of sunlight touched the peak just as they arrived. 3 moons hung in the darkening sky, exactly as the legend said. They had done it. The broken Sylvari and the flightless human had conquered the trial of ascension. They were not first. They were not in the top 10, but they had finished. And no one had ever done what they just did. Daniel started laughing, exhausted and joyful. Kira joined him, tears and laughter mixing together. Below them, still on the summit from their own earlier arrivals, the other competitors stared in disbelief. The impossible had happened, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The story of what happened on Mount Vareth spread across the academy like fire through dry grass. By the next morning, everyone had heard about the human and the Sylvari who could not fly, yet somehow reached the summit anyway. Kira walked into the dining hall and immediately noticed the change. Students who had ignored her for years now turned to look. Some stared with curiosity. Others whispered to their companions. A few even nodded in what might have been respect. It was the strangest feeling she had ever experienced. Daniel found her sitting alone at their usual table, looking overwhelmed. Pretty crazy, right? He said, sliding into the seat across from her. Kira nodded slowly. I do not know what to do with this attention. I spent so long being invisible. Now everyone sees me. Is that a bad thing? I do not know yet. The attention came in many forms. Professors who had barely acknowledged Kira's existence now stopped her in hallways to offer congratulations. The Academy administration sent a formal message recognizing their achievement. Media outlets from distant worlds requested interviews. Not all the attention was positive. 3 days after the trial, a group of Torvins cornered Daniel in the equipment storage building. There were 5 of them, led by a massive warrior named Brath. He was the same Torvin who had mocked them during the trial. Human, Brath said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. We need to talk. Daniel set down the gear he had been organizing. Okay, what about? About your deception. Brath stepped closer, his scaled body towering over Daniel. You cheated in the trial. You used forbidden technology. There is no other explanation for how you reached the summit. There's no deception, Daniel said calmly. Just rope and determination. Lies. Brath's eyes narrowed. You make a mockery of our traditions. You pretend the crippled one is your equal. This cannot be allowed. Daniel did not back away. He stood his ground, looking up at the Torvin without fear. Kira isn't just my equal, he said. She's smarter than most people in this academy. She solved puzzles that stumped teams of geniuses. The only thing she can't do is fly, and honestly, that just makes her accomplishments more impressive. Wrath grabbed Daniel by the front of his uniform and lifted him off the ground. You insult us, the Torvin growled. You insult everything we believe. Then, maybe what you believe is wrong. Before Brath could respond, a voice rang out across the storage building. Put him down. Everyone turned. Kira stood in the doorway, her silver eyes blazing with an anger no one had ever seen from her before. I said put him down, she repeated, walking toward them without hesitation. Brath laughed. The broken bird speaks. What will you do, little one? You cannot fight. You cannot fly. You are nothing. I am nothing? Kira stopped directly in front of him. I have been called nothing my entire life. I have been ignored, mocked, abandoned. I have stood alone in selection ceremonies while everyone chose someone else. I have felt the weight of your contempt every single day. She stepped even closer, her voice growing stronger. But this human saw something in me that no one else bothered to look for. He chose me when the entire galaxy said I was worthless. And together, we did something that has never been done in 300 years. Kira pointed at Brath's chest. So do not tell me what I am. Do not tell me what I cannot do. And do not you dare threaten the only person who ever believed in me. The storage building went silent. Brath stared at Kira as if seeing her for the first time. Something shifted in his expression, something that might have been the beginning of understanding. Slowly, he lowered Daniel to the ground. Perhaps, Brath said quietly, we have misjudged both of you. He turned and walked away. The other Torvins followed without a word. Daniel straightened his uniform and looked at Kira with wonder. That was incredible, he said. Kira's hands were shaking. I have never done anything like that before. How did it feel? She thought about it for a moment. Then a small smile crossed her face. It felt good. The confrontation became another story that spread through the academy. The image of the small Sylvari girl standing up to 5 Torvin warriors captured everyone's imagination. People began to see Kira differently, not as a broken thing to be pitied, but as someone with unexpected strength. More importantly, the other humans at the academy took notice. Lisa Monroe approached. A Mythori named Vex who had been rejected by his clan because he was born without the ability to generate the light that his people use to communicate. She offered him partnership for a research project, and he accepted with tears in his crystalline eyes. Nathan Park started working with a Torvin named Krell, who had lost his warrior status after an injury left him unable to fight. Together, they designed new technologies that could help others with similar disabilities. Amy Green formed a bond with an elderly professor named Zara, who had been pushed aside by younger faculty. The old teacher had forgotten knowledge that no one else remembered, and Amy helped her share it with a new generation. The humans were changing things, not through strength or advanced technology, but through simple kindness, through the radical act of seeing value in those that others had thrown away. One evening, Kira found Daniel sitting alone in the academy gardens. He was staring up at the stars, lost in thought. What are you thinking about? She asked, sitting beside him. Home, Daniel said. Earth. Wondering what my family would think of all this. Do you miss them? Every day. He smiled softly. But I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I found you. Kira was quiet for a moment. You have changed things, Daniel. You and your people. The way others see those like me, the outcasts and the broken ones, it is different now. We're just treating people the way we want to be treated. It's not that complicated. It is, Kira said. It is perhaps the most complicated thing in the universe. And yet humans make it seem so simple. Daniel turned to look at her. Can I tell you something? Of course. When I first came to this academy, I was terrified. Humans are so small and weak compared to everyone else here. I didn't think I had anything to offer. He paused. But then I met you, and I realized something. What? Strength isn't about being the biggest or the fastest. It's about choosing to do what's right, even when it's hard. It's about lifting others up instead of pushing them down. He reached over and took her hand. You taught me that, Kira. Your whole life has been about surviving against odds that would have broken anyone else. You're the strongest person I know. Kira felt tears forming in her eyes again. These humans and their ability to reach past all her walls. I was so alone before you came, she whispered. I had forgotten what it felt like to have someone care. You're not alone anymore, Daniel said. You never will be again. They sat together in the garden as the moons rose overhead. Around them, the academy continued its eternal routines, students studying and competing and striving for greatness. But something had shifted. Something fundamental had changed. The galaxy was beginning to learn a lesson that humans had always known. That true strength was not found in power or perfection. It was found in the courage to care for one another, especially those that the rest of the world had forgotten. And once that lesson took hold, nothing would ever be the same again. 5 years passed like a dream. Kira stood before the mirror in her sleeping quarters, adjusting the ceremonial robe she would wear for graduation. The fabric was beautiful, woven with threads of silver and blue that matched her eyes. Her damaged wing was hidden beneath a special garment that Nathan had designed for her. Elegant and comfortable, she looked at herself and barely recognized the woman staring back. 5 years ago, she had been a frightened, lonely girl who believed she was worthless. Now she was graduating at the top of her class, the first disabled Sylvari in history to earn full academic honors. 3 different worlds had offered her positions. Scholars across the galaxy wanted to study with her. Her name was known in places she had never even dreamed of visiting, and it had all started with a simple question. Will you walk with me? A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Daniel stood in the hallway, wearing his own graduation robes. The years had changed him too. He had grown taller, stronger, more confident. But his eyes were the same, warm and kind, and full of light. Ready? He asked. Kira smiled. Ready. They walked together through the academy halls, just as they had done thousands of times before. Other students greeted them as they passed. Professors nodded with respect. The Sylvari elders, who had once considered Kira an embarrassment, now spoke her name with pride. The graduation ceremony was held in the selection hall, the same place where everything had begun. Kira paused at the entrance, memories flooding through her mind. Feels strange, doesn't it? Daniel said. Being back here, strange and wonderful. Kira looked around at the glowing walls and floating lights. I used to hate this place. Now I think I will miss it. The ceremony was long and formal, filled with speeches and traditions that stretched back thousands of years. One by one, the graduating pairs were called forward to receive their honors. When Daniel and Kira's names were announced, the entire hall rose to their feet. The applause lasted for several minutes. Students and professors, Torvins and Nathori, Sylvari and humans, all standing together to honor the pair that had changed so much. Kira felt tears running down her face. She did not try to stop them. After the ceremony, there was a celebration in the gardens. Food and music and laughter filled the air. Old friends said goodbye. New plans were made. The future stretched out before them, bright and full of possibility. But Daniel had one more thing he wanted to do before the day ended. Come with me, he said to Kira. There's someone I want you to meet. He led her back to the selection hall, A new ceremony was taking place. Younger students gathering to form their own partnerships. The scene was exactly as it had been 5 years ago, filled with nervous energy and quiet hope. Daniel pointed toward a corner of the hall. A young Torvin stood there alone. He was small for his species, barely reaching the shoulder of other Torvins his age. His right arm hung at an angle that spoke of old injury, twisted and clearly unable to function properly. "His name is Vorn," Daniel said quietly. "I asked about him. He has been at the academy for 2 years. No one has ever chosen him as a partner." Kira's heart ached with recognition. She knew exactly what that felt like. The loneliness, the shame, the slow death of hope that came with each rejection. "He reminds me of someone," she whispered. "Me too." Kira looked at Daniel. He was watching Vorn with the same expression he had worn 5 years ago when he first saw her standing alone. "What do you think?" Daniel asked. "Should we go say hello?" Kira did not hesitate. Yes. Together, they walked across the hall. The crowd parted around them, recognizing the famous pair. Whispers followed in their wake. Everyone wondered what the legendary human and his Sylvari partner were doing. They stopped in front of Vorn. The young Torvin looked up at them with wide eyes. Fear and confusion and desperate hope flickered across his face. "You are Kira Veth," he said, his voice barely audible. "And Daniel Carter. Everyone knows who you are." Kira knelt down so she was at his eye level. "Yes, and we know who you are too, Vorn. You do?" He seemed shocked that anyone had bothered to learn his name. Daniel knelt beside Kira. "We've heard your story. Standing alone. Being passed over. Believing that no one will ever see you as worthy." Vorn's damaged arm trembled. "I am weak. I cannot fight like other Torvins. My arm does not work. I am a disgrace to my clan." "That's not true," Kira said gently. "I used to believe the same things about myself. I thought I was worthless because I could not fly. But I was wrong. Someone showed me how wrong I was." She glanced at Daniel, who smiled. "Vorn," Kira continued, "you are not defined by what you cannot do. You are defined by who you are and who you choose to become. Do you understand?" The young Torvin shook his head. "I wanted to understand. But everyone says I am nothing. Then everyone is wrong." Kira extended her hand toward him. "We have a question for you, Vorn, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer." Vorn stared at her hand as if it might be a trap. Daniel spoke softly. "Will you walk with us?" The hall went completely silent. Every being in the room was watching now, witnessing something that felt important, even if they did not fully understand why. Vorn looked from Kira to Daniel and back again. Tears began forming in his large eyes. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you choose me? You could have anyone. You are heroes." Kira smiled. "Because everyone deserves someone who believes in them. Everyone deserves a chance. And because we remember what it feels like to stand alone." Daniel nodded. "We can't promise it will be easy. We can't promise that others will suddenly accept you. But we can promise that you won't have to face any of it alone. Not anymore." For a long moment, Vorn did not move. 5 years of rejection had taught him to expect nothing good. 5 years of loneliness had made him afraid of hope. But something about these two felt different. Something about the kindness in their eyes made him want to believe. Slowly, carefully, his damaged arm trembling with emotion, Vorn reached out and took their hands. Kira squeezed his fingers gently. Daniel smiled with warmth that reached his eyes. Behind them, the watching crowd began to understand. This was not just a gesture. This was a continuation of something that had started 5 years ago, a chain of kindness that refused to break. Later, historians would write about this moment. They would describe how the philosophy of human compassion spread across the galaxy, changing how species treated their outcasts and their broken. They would credit Daniel and Kira with starting a movement that transformed entire civilizations. But in that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was a frightened young Torvin who had finally been seen. What mattered was the simple act of reaching out to someone who had been left behind. Humans could not fly. They were not the strongest or the smartest species in the galaxy. They had no natural weapons, no special powers, no obvious advantages, but they understood something that others had forgotten. They understood that kindness was not weakness, that compassion was not foolishness, that the true measure of a civilization was how it treated its most vulnerable members. They understood that no one should have to walk alone, and that understanding, passed from hand to hand and heart to heart, would change the universe forever. Kira looked at Daniel as they led Vorn out of the selection hall and into the bright sunlight of a new day. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For asking me to walk with you." "For changing everything?" Daniel shook his head. "I didn't change anything. I just asked a question. The question was enough." They walked together into the future. Three beings from different worlds, bound by something stronger than blood or species or circumstance, bound by the simple, revolutionary act of choosing to care. And that was how it always began. Not with armies or technology or grand speeches. It began with a question. It began with a hand extended in friendship. It began with the courage to see value in those the rest of the world had overlooked. "Will you walk with me?" The answer was yes. The answer was always yes.